Claudette with theycallmemartha.com, and today I am here with another tutorial video to show you how you can use your pattern paper to create a really cute card. And this card that I have in mind today is going to combine a shaker card with patterned paper, and the idea that I have in my head hopefully will work out, but you can follow along with me. So I've pulled out one of my 6x6 paper pads. This one is by Simple Stories. It's called Summer Fresh. It's old. I hate to admit how many years it's been in my stash, and I haven't used it because I love the papers, and I am really on a mission to use the things that I have and stop saving them and actually start enjoying them and not be afraid to cut things or to use up things that I love. So that's one of my goals for this year, as I've said in my other videos, is to really use more of my stash, and in particular my pattern paper. So in this particular card design, I'm going to start out with our card base. This is an A2 size, and I went ahead and cut down one of the papers from this collection to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I may end up trimming it down a little bit so that we have that cute little white border. I'm not quite sure yet, but for now it's a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And the idea that I have for this card is a floating sentiment shaker card. What I mean by that is I want to have a shaker card sitting, or I want to have a shaker element sitting on the front of my card, but then rather than have a glued sentiment, as we traditionally do when we make cards, is to have it float around like a shaker bit. So anyway, here's my idea. I'm starting out by working with a frame die. This one is by Hero Arts, and it's a layered die, or I guess infinity die set that has several of the different varying sizes. Something I definitely recommend you put in your stash. I use this die a lot. It's got this really fun wood grain pattern. So I've pulled that out, and this one measures, let's see, it's about 4 1/2 by 3 1/2, thereabouts. But if you don't have a frame die and you have rectangular dies, you could actually layer 2 dies together like this. Let me get one that's a little bit smaller so it makes more sense. So you can layer 2 together and apply a little bit of removable adhesive or low-tack adhesive. And what I do is I place it behind and then layer in the element, and you want to tape it on both sides so it doesn't shift. That's the key, right? Then run this through your die cut machine, and then you get essentially a frame shape. And you can do this trick with any of your nested die series, whether it's ovals, circles, hearts, whatever, as long as you have a gap between the two and you can tape it down so that you can repeat that frame over and over again, you get a really nice effect. So anyway, that's how you make a frame if you don't have frame dies. But what I did is I went ahead and cut this frame out of heavyweight cardstock. I think this is 110-pound Kraft cardstock. My favorite is the Recollections brand from Michaels. Cut that frame out, looks like 4 or 5 times, something like that. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating a shaker well so that the little bits inside of our shaker card can move around. If you don't want to stack paper, you can also use foam tape. So just as in a traditional shaker card, you can apply foam strips around your frame to kind of set it up from your paper. I actually like to do it with multiple layers of paper. I think you get a much more solid result, and it helps to really, I think, create some stability with your card. So the first thing I'm going to do is start by gluing these together. So I'm going to use liquid adhesive here, and the reason why I use liquid adhesive is so that I have a moment to move them around and line them up. So making sure all my corners line up, because if you're stacking them, you want to make sure that they're nice and even all the way around. So here I've added 1 additional layer, and I'm just working my way around to make sure that all of my edges line up. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this with the rest of my layers. And again, I'm using my dry baby wipe. If you've never heard me give this tip before, I'll say it one more time. I let my baby wipes sit out overnight, and I use them to pick up any kind of glue that seeps out, or ink for that matter, and it keeps it off my hands, and it keeps me from transferring it to other things. Okay, I've got my frame put together. Now I'm bringing back my panel back in that I cut with my patterned paper. And I think what I want to do is have this little frame sit kind of on an angle like that. So I'm going to start by gluing this down to the card panel. And you want to make sure that no little shaker bits are going to escape. So you have to make sure that you have enough glue, but not so much glue that it kind of seeps out and makes a mess. So I am making sure that my glue goes all the way around, but that it's not so much glue, again, that it will seep out. All right, now I'm just going to glue it to my card panel and then give it a good press. Again, I'm using my dry baby wipe to make sure that I'm picking up any of that glue that decides to come out. I decided to change my card base to Kraft instead of the white one that I had pulled earlier. And so I'm just going to score this in half for an A2 size card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then burnish down this fold. All right, and now I'm going to glue my panel to the front of the card. So for the sentiment, I'm using a die from my stash. This is by Simon Says Stamp, and it has a really nice shadow. It's a great die for you to keep in your collection. You can use it in a variety of different ways. And today I've cut it out of like a navy colored cardstock, which I thought matched this paper really well. And then I've also cut it several times out of that same Kraft cardstock that we made our frame out of. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it 3 times, so, or stack it 3 times so that this sentiment has some weight when it's inside the shaker box. So I'm adding my wet glue all around and then stacking the next layer. And I find that keeping it in the frame from which you cut it just helps it line up a little easier rather than trying to hold it while you kind of line up those edges. I find that this is the fastest way to line it up. So I've got 2 layers, and now I'm going to add that blue layer on top. Just going to use my little pokey tool to help me out here, making sure everything is lined up, and then I will punch it out. The next thing I want to do is add some of my shaker bits, and so I just went into my stash and pulled out sequins that matched my pattern paper. So I've got from Doodlebug, this is a ladybug color and limeade. And sadly, I think these colors have been retired, but if you have them in your stash or you can get a hold of them, I would recommend it. I have it in all the colors and they're so cute. I like the little bottles that they come in. Okay, and because I think the star of our shaker card is the sentiment, I want to make sure that I'm not overfilling my shaker. We can always add a little bit more here at the end. And then the last thing I like to do is add, I always like to add a like a seed bead, something that's going to create the shaking sound, because sequins doesn't really do that. So I'm adding in some of this gold or yellow colored seed bead in there. And then I just want to make sure before we go any further, I always like to just press through my sequins to make sure that none of it is stacked up. I recently did a graduation card, and one of the first ones I did had a big grouping of stars that were all sandwiched together. And once I sealed my card together, I couldn't get them out. So it's kind of a bummer. That's why I like to go through and make sure that they're kind of all separate. All right, now I'm going to bring back in our sentiment that we layered up, and that's just going to sit on top of the seed beads. Okay, that's what I'm hoping to do, is get that kind of movement with the sentiment. I just thought that would be fun. Then I want to glue this acetate panel to the front of my frame, and I'm just testing it to make sure that it will shake around, and I think it will. I don't think I want to add any additional shaker bits. Now I'm just going to add my glue all the way around. I think I need to refill my bottle. I'm getting down to the bottom. but I want to make sure that I have a continuous line of glue so that none of my little shaker bits escape. But again, that I don't have so much that it creates a mess. Okay, so I've got my glue down, and then now my clear acetate panel. I'm just going to lay that right over top. All right, and then we're going to finish it with our final frame layer, which kind of seals all of that in. Okay, I'm going to add my final frame layer. And make sure that my edges are all lined up. And that wet glue really gives me a moment of time where I can shift it around and line it up, which is really what I want. I want to make sure that all those edges are nicely aligned to each other. It looks like one thick piece of wood in this case. Okay, and then you can see our little sentiment is actually inside our shaker card. So I think that that's fun. All right, now I wanted to further embellish the front. And so I made a bunch of little flowers and leaves that I die cut out. I'll show you how I made these in just a minute. But I was thinking about adding these kind of to the front with some leaves, you know, maybe something like that, just to, again, tie in the patterned paper a little bit. From the Stampin' die set, it's called Flower Patch by Stampin' Up, and a really nice set to make lots of different types of flowers. But what I love is it also includes the dies. So here I just pulled a couple of the flower dies and then a leaf die. I'm going to run this through my die cut machine, and then I'll show you how I colored them. All right, so a couple of these flowers I stamped, and then a couple of them I just colored. So I'll kind of walk you through what I did. So here's one of those leaves, and then here's a couple of these cute little flowers. What I did was I stamped, let's see, I think I stamped that one and that little one. And here's the red one. So let me show you how I did that. I actually did a combination of stamping and Copic coloring. All right, so for the flower, I'm just pulling out of my stash some red ink, and I'm just going to stamp my flower. And you can see here, I didn't even get the best coverage. I'm going to fix that with my Copic markers. Okay, and then let me do these cute little yellow ones here. I'm just going to stamp this cute little flower. And then also the little tiny one. All right, and then what I did from my Copic markers, I just pulled out a few different shades of red. And I really don't care for white borders, especially on flowers. I don't know what it is, but you know, when you die cut them out, you get that little white border typically, and any chance I get, I try to cover it up. And so the way this flower worked out, I think it came out perfect in that I just used my lighter red marker. It doesn't have to be a Copic, by the way. It can be any kind of marker that you have. I'm just going around that white edge. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of a darker color as well. And then what I want to do is give the flower a little bit of dimension. So I'm going to come from the center and flick out toward each of the leaves and go all the way around. Now you could also skip the stamping step if you just want to use your Copic markers and color, or your alcohol-based markers and color. This was just kind of how I created that first flower there that I showed you. I actually thought, oh, I'll just stamp it at first, and then I didn't like the white edge, so this is how I kind of landed on this method. Okay, and I've just come in with another shade of dark red, and then I'm going to finish out the whole thing in the lighter red. Then I took that little yellow flower and popped it up on a little tiny foam dot and created the flower. Now, if you want to, you can come in and fold the leaves a little bit and give them a little bit of dimension. And then I almost always finish my flowers with Stickles. This is Stardust, which is my favorite color. of all of the stickles. And sadly, because probably like most of you, you like to buy all the colors. I have bought all the colors of stickles and I only use this one. How sad is that, right? But they look pretty in my craft room. So I'm glad I have them, but I suppose one of these days I'll find a way to use some of those other colors. But this one, I love it. It works on any color cardstock or any, you know, color that you put it on. Okay, so that's our cute little red flower. And then the way I finished off the other flowers is just to add a little flat back pearl. And so in this case, I'm just going to use this little red center, I think. And then I'll show you how I do my leaves, which I just used Copic markers doing my leaves. So they're so tiny, they kind of go pretty quick. So I'm just going to add my little center like that. So there's our two little flowers. And then for the leaf, let me just bring in a piece of scratch paper here. And for the leaf, I just pulled in a couple of colors of green and just going to give those a quick brushing of color. And what I like to do with my darker green, typically with leaves, is just to kind of draw down the center of the leaf and then maybe some of the veins. And then if you fold it a little bit, like down the middle, you kind of get a little bit of that dimension. So that's how I built these little flowers. And now let's go ahead and finish off the card and I'll show you how I put them on there. All right, so here's our little shaker. And I think I'm going to start with my biggest flower in this lower right-hand corner. And I folded the leaves and added the stickles already, and so this has quite a bit of dimension. And then I'm going to tuck in, I think, some of these leaves. So I'll just add a little bit of that glue to the back as well. Kind of tuck them underneath the flower, I think, a little bit like that. And then I want to build a little cluster up here. This is another, I didn't show you how to stamp this one, but it's done the same way as the others. It's just with pink ink and then a pink Copic marker to kind of fill in the white edge. I did not fill in the white edge on the yellow ones because the yellow was so light. I didn't think we really needed it. And then I want to add in some of these leaves here as well. I'm going to start kind of tucking them under. And I think I might want to, I think I'm going to pop that pink one up. So I'm just going to go to my foam dots. Maybe I'll do a bigger one here. Add a little yellow. And maybe another leaf. And then one more leaf down here in this corner, I think. Okay, and there is our shaker card with the floating sentiment inside. And I think that turned out cute. It's what I had envisioned. I think overall, I just like that it's fun and different. So I hope that you enjoyed this card design and that you're going to make one of these as well. And if you liked my video and you like my content overall, I would love for you to become a subscriber. And if you could give me a thumbs up, it really does help me grow my channel and get this video out to other crafters who might have fun with it as well. All right, thank you all, and we'll see you on another day for another card video.